Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Breaking Through the Permission Barrier with Lara O'Reilly and Brian Whipple.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We've made it more than halfway through. Yeah, thank you very much. I always forget about that part. I just want to dive straight in because we haven't got that much time. So, Brian, Accenture Interactive obviously has been around for a while, but it feels like the last couple of years something really accelerated. And so last year your financials came out only recently and your part of the business grew by 20%. So what is it that's driving your part of the business? Because 20% on the revenue we're doing last year, I think Campaign worked it out, makes you the size of IPG, essentially, on a revenue basis.
Yeah.
So what's been going on?
Well, I think what you're probably referencing is the earnings call from roughly a week ago, where our CEO, Pierre Nanterme, referenced that the business of things that we consider in the new was growing at roughly 20%. So Accenture Interactive is clearly a very large and high growth engine that would clearly be inside the new at Accenture, but there will be other businesses in Accenture that would also be considered in the new, such as security, cloud, and things that are very different from the other businesses that Accenture has been in for years and years, such as outsourcing and the like. So that being said,
you're not going to give me the numbers then, basically.
That's not going to happen. No, that's not going to happen. No, but we are clearly at the highest growth end of what Accenture is doing, and I think that you're aware that in FY17 we had grown 35%. So I can't talk about the numbers for this year, but we're one of the highest growth engines inside Accenture. So in terms of what's been going on, it's a lot. There's several things that we've got right in the last couple of years. One has been taking advantage of building this business on the shoulders of Accenture and having access to really the entire C-suite. 2 or 3 years ago, I might have been talking about access to the CMO, but it's really a joint effort with the CEO, CIO, CFO, and digital officers. Sometimes there's experience officer. It's not just a CMO play. So that's something we've got right now. And then we have global scale now as well. So that has changed the game and certainly made life interesting, as we were talking about up there a little bit on the personal front. But in terms of the global scale and building out what it's like to be an experience agency around the globe. But we've got those things right the last couple of years.
And obviously you've been busily buying up tons of companies. In terms of when looking at your growth, how much is kind of organic versus your acquisitions? What's the kind of mix like there? Again, I know you're not going to give me a number, but just give me a feel.
Well, I can very clearly say that the vast majority of our growth is organic, not inorganic. So at the kind of scale we're at, our business is largely predicated. I mean, sometimes we add acquisitions, but we only add them for 2 reasons. One is to establish a new capability, such as we did with Fjord in essentially the service design area some 5 to 6 years ago. And the other reason would be to scale an existing capability, perhaps in a new geography, or a new geography to Accenture Interactive, such as buying Pacific Link in Hong Kong some 2 to 3 years ago. So we did a lot of the work, digital marketing work that Pacific Link did, but we weren't big on it in Hong Kong at the time. So, but the point is to then, in either case, leverage acquisitions to then grow organically, because remember, our play is not to leave them as standalone enterprises, but to have one Accenture Interactive team around the globe. And so, but by far, the lion's share of our growth is organic growth.
Sure. And how many people, roughly, do you have around the globe that work kind of full-time for Accenture Interactive?
Yeah, so we did research and publish this number for Investor Day, which I think was last calendar spring, and don't hold me to the date exactly, so something like 6 months ago. And I think the number we had at the end of last fiscal year was just under 25,000 people full-time on Accenture Interactive work around the globe. And so that number is a little bit old, but it gives you a general frame.
Right, but you also have access to the wider kind of Accenture empire as well?
We do, and many of our engagements, because they are on the shoulders of Accenture, are part of a broader network of relationships or broader strategic transformation collaboration with our clients. And Accenture Interactive can be a big part, but many times it's not the only part.
Sure. Okay, now talk to me a little bit more about what it is you actually do. You describe yourselves as an experience agency, which to me means nothing.
Yeah.
Or experience at least means like a pop-up in a mall or something, a thing at a festival. I gather it means a little bit more than that. So can you explain the actual things that you do, the things that you make, the things I can go out there and see?
Yeah, so basically what we mean by experience, and it's experience with a big E. So we're not talking about experience architecture on a website or experience design on a mobile app or a pop-up in a mall, as you reference. We could be talking about an amalgamation of all of those things and many others in terms of any type of digital brand with that consumer. So, for example, what we're really passionate about is reinventing stale experiences. So I'm sure many people here in the audience have had the experience of bringing a loved one, and perhaps a child, to the emergency room with a broken arm or something that happened in Johnny's basketball game. And that experience, at least in the US, but from my research around the globe, is largely unchanged in the last 30 years. You have that experience, you know you need to go to a trauma center or ER. You don't know necessarily what the closest one is, or if you do, maybe there's 3 of them. You don't know what the waiting times are in each one. They don't know who you are. They don't know why you're coming in. You don't know, they don't have any of your insurance information. You might not know exactly how to get there because perhaps you're not at home. So all of these things, and if you go into that trauma center today, the only thing that's different about that trauma center, that experience, from 30 years ago, the only thing is that there might be Wi-Fi in the lobby. That is the only thing that's different, despite massive advances in mobile technology and other consumer-friendly advances. And you contrast that with something like hailing a cab outside here in New York City versus on a rainy day. And it can be quite a pain in New York City or in London or wherever. And you can get quite wet and have your umbrella blow upside down and all kinds of interesting experiences. But today, look at the way Uber has, and others, have revolutionized that experience entirely to become a seamless interface. So taking that emergency room example, that's just something where it's a stale experience. So our business is going after experiences of that nature in various industries. It could be a retail experience, it could be a car buying experience, it could be trying on clothes in a high-end department store, it could be boarding an airline, which I did earlier today. So if you think about things that have not changed, that need to change or could change, and many of them you might not think about because you're so accustomed to it, but that is the business of an experience agency. Now typically I get asked, well, how does that relate to advertising or media? Well, it doesn't. I mean, clearly, advertising is an incredibly important part of building any type of new experience because you need to communicate about it to your consumers, and you need to educate them, and you need to make them feel passion about that new experience. But advertising is just one part of it, as is potentially immersive technologies, as is digital content management, as is commerce technologies, and everything else. So we are in the business really not of creating ad campaigns per se, unless it is in the context of reinventing what we refer to as a stale experience.
Sure. And can you talk to some of the some of the brands that you've worked with where you have moved more in that kind of advertising direction? As you say, at the end, it's to amplify this new kind of experience that you've built.
Well, I don't know if I have, our mission is really not to have, pure advertising clients.
Yeah.
And so if the question is, what is the latest, restaurant chain for us to bid on their general ad agency of record business, that's not typically something we would do. We do have, a number of large referenceable client work that we've done here in the US and in Europe. Some of them include places like Subway, places like Marriott, places like Carnival, and those are examples of where we're, changing the quick service restaurant dining experience and ordering experience. We're changing the vacation experience through Carnival and things like that.
And you were talking earlier about how you have experience, well, Accenture has experience with the entire C-suite. Is that how you win a lot of your business, kind of through osmosis? Because you've got the ear of the CEO and the CIO, and they've got an issue, and like how does that then kind of move into your world?
Well, I don't know about osmosis. I wish it were that easy, but clearly our relationships there have helped a great deal. I mean, that's a fact, and that's an advantage that we've had, and has clearly been an instrumental factor in our growth. In general, I would say there are two types of major business development activities that Accenture Interactive has. One would be responding to a request, but not responding in the way that it's asked. So, because many of the clients have not pivoted towards transformation, and they might ask about a media agency of record, or they might ask about a new creative campaign, but we would come back with a discussion at the executive and or board level about, well, that's great you're thinking about this, but have you looked at your business holistically and talked about forming a new digital business or reinventing your customer experience? And sometimes you get warm receptivity to that, and sometimes not as much. And frequently, if it's not as much, we might just withdraw at that stage because I only have so many critical resources to deploy, and we might not do that. The other method, where my executive team spends a lot of time, I spend a lot of time, is ideating and innovating around what experiences could be, such as one of the examples I gave you a few minutes ago, and then looking for partners in the market to go bring that to life. Because we're very passionate about not doing things that are necessarily the next Bluetooth toaster or various other things that take advantage of technology, but not necessarily for strong business or human good. And so we're passionate about making people's lives better, if you can believe that. I mean, that's a big part of what we do. Does that happen in every case? Of course not. But looking for partners in the ecosystem about improving the efficiency of lives or making that experience more meaningful. That's a big part of what we do, and we're out there proactively pursuing clients to partner on that.
Do you find sometimes that some CMOs might be kind of fearful of working with a company like yours? And I say this because a CMO's tenure is kind of famously quite short. They have short-term targets. These jobs that you're talking about sound like they take a number of years. They sound frankly expensive. They sound new, something that you may never have done before as a CMO. And you obviously have to take the business case to the CEO and say, well, I don't know if this will work or not, but we'll find out in 5 years.
Yeah.
Does that come up at all?
I don't know if CMOs per se would be fearful of working with us. You probably have to ask them. I would hope not. But I think to your question, you get at a very interesting point. I think that there are a couple different categories of CMOs in the current landscape. And without having done exact research on this, I can just tell you from experience of myself and my team, we're at kind of a tipping point where if you look at the Fortune 2000 companies maybe around the globe, companies that invest heavily in digital consumer, I would hypothesize that roughly half of those CMOs have more of a traditional marketing brand management background that are maybe fluent in digital, but that hasn't been their emphasis. And the other half can come from more of the digital ecosystem themselves and have probably been put in that role in the last 5 to 7 years. Within the first half, many of them want a partner that is a change agent to help reinvent the experience and help through a model of collaboration, work with the other chief executives and really change their job from being a brand or marketing job where they're measured on brand impressions and the like, and into a business job where they're measured on sales and return on investment and cost per acquired customer and things like that. So that's a big part of what we do.
And similarly, does it actually help that when the CMO goes to their CEO and says, Accenture have come to me with this proposal, as opposed to some, wacky experience agency that they may never have heard of? It comes with that reputation. They've worked with you for years for their accounting and so on.
Yeah, so we touched on why this has been a very strong business for Accenture, and the part we touched on was that we're building on the shoulders of Accenture through access to CEO and board level relationships. But there's another aspect to that, which you're hitting on now, which is, without a doubt, yes is the short answer. I mean, if you are an executive at a client, and let's say that particular company already does, some big number, $75 million a year in something I don't know anything about, like infrastructure outsourcing or something like that with Accenture. But their company, pays a firm like us or a firm like ours, the broader firm, Accenture, to do lots of technical outsourcing work, big, complicated, multinational assignments with people in many, many different countries and global responsibility and a lot of technology integration. And then they say, well, we're actually going to do something big, hairy, and complicated, but more in the marketing space. The fact that we have that trusted advisor relationship with that executive team, with the client, helps immensely. It's not just about access. It's about the fact that as a company, we frequently have trusted advisor status, that a small agency, even if they could tackle the kinds of things that we tackle, they might not have the credentials there.
Sure, they don't have the legacy.
Yeah.
So something that you don't have a legacy in. Recently, you launched the programmatic buying division. What's it called again? Sorry, the
Accenture Interactive Programmatic Services.
Snappy, like it.
Yes.
So you recently moved into that.
I think she knew that, actually.
I honestly wasn't setting that up, honestly. So you recently launched that new division.
Yeah.
What, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, something like that?
It was warm and in New York, so that's probably,
Right, okay.
Let's call it 3 months, yeah.
Give me an idea as to how that's going, because you launched with a couple of kind of launch clients. Have you won any more? And what have you learned on the way? Is it harder than you thought? Is it easier?
So we were doing that both in North America and in Europe well before that, what we called launch. It was really more of a formalization of that offering because our clients were asking us to do that. It's going quite well. We've got a very strong pipeline of new work in that area, new and existing work in that area, and it's only getting stronger, and we're building up our teams to do that. It's not, it's complicated technical work, but that is the type of work why buyers come to Accenture Interactive.
Sure.
If it was easy, then our value proposition would be less, but that is one of our, definitely a high growth area for us.
And can you talk a little about what you actually do technically, what it is you go into these companies and help out with, how you change them?
Yeah. So there's multiple parts to it, but the gist of it is it's really more of an in-sourcing play. So, for years, clients have been uncomfortable with the lack of transparency on media more broadly. And, Accenture Interactive does not really play in the space of traditional media planning and buying. If we did, it would be by far the exception. But we are in the intersection of marketing and technology, but ultimately is programmatic digital. That is the ultimate intersection of those two things. We are a player, and that is a classic example of taking that very complicated landscape for clients. If you're a client trying to manage your digital ad spend efficiently, you have 25 different vendors telling you 25 different things, and 3 different integrators telling you 3 different things, and all these different strategies. And on top of that, they typically aren't able to leverage their own data. Someone else always winds up owning their data. So our play is really about building a collaborative team with Accenture Interactive and client people at the client site, where we can work together and evolve, and we can be platform agnostic to take advantage of whatever is right in the marketplace. It's really more of an in-sourcing play, if you will, to help them manage that ad spend.
Sure. And now something that surprised me when you launched this particular division was, so there's this wider narrative around kind of consulting firms kind of encroaching on Madison Avenue's turf and taking a slice of what was this kind of status quo and a slice of the kind of marketer's budget. And when you launched this division, it was very kind of bombastic, and it was a clear kind of like what looked like a bit of a middle finger up to the agency, saying that the way of buying programmatic media is antiquated and agencies have been adversarial, and there was quite strong language used there. I wondered if you could talk me through kind of why you did that. As I said, I was taken aback that you went about it that way.
I might need to look up bombastic in the dictionary, but I think that
there's a good
means,
song.
Loud with little meaning or something like that. So I mean, that is 100% has not been and is not now the intent. I would say we perhaps were more vocal about that than some of our other related offerings because we consistently heard from our clients that this needed to be formalized rather than be something that we just kind of bring to them, as a matter of fact, as just an additional service, that we'd have here. So a lot of that was in reaction to our clients and in terms of, and they want a more transparent, offering in the marketplace. And so yes, of course, we want to grow this business, but this is also part of a broader movement that we're behind outside of what we're doing at Accenture Interactive for greater transparency and for client data ownership. In terms of a middle finger to the holding companies, that nothing could be farther from the truth on that. We partner with all of those companies. They're all very well run. I know many of those leaders and have nothing but respect and feel very positive about that. And that's really not the case.
It did just seem like you were kind of poking the hornet's nest a little bit, not least because then afterwards there was so much concern raised by the agency community that you were even moving into this space because Accenture also offers services like auditing where they ask lots of questions about agency businesses and they get to see lots of the numbers and they were worried about this conflict of interest. And I know you've addressed this before, but it'd just be good to address those concerns again and why you think that isn't an issue.
And by auditing, I think you mean media audits?
Media audits, but also advising services, advising on which agencies to use, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I can tell you that in the last couple of years where this discussion has been relevant, so I've heard that come up from you and one or two other places. It has never once, ever, come up internally at any client engagement.
Right.
We're a very large-scale business for Accenture. The division you're referring to is inside, I'm not exactly sure, but it is inside the procurement arm of Accenture. I think inside Accenture Operation. It doesn't really matter, but there are some very smart people doing good work there, but it is at a completely different order of magnitude scale. The teams are not coordinated at all. It is essentially a completely different business. And I have not seen or heard from a single client of any conflict there at all, and I have double checked with my leaders around the globe on that. But I will tell you, should that ever come up by a client, because that's what matters to us, we will always take the interests of our clients first, and we would do something about it.
But it's not necessarily the clients that are going to be most concerned. It's agencies thinking it's anti-competitive, and that's why the 4As wrote a letter.
Well, the clients' concerns are what I'm concerned about.
Yeah.
So not necessarily what other agencies think. That doesn't concern me really at all.
Okay.
So, it concerns me in that we're partners with them.
Yeah.
And but that has not been an impediment to winning any work, hiring any people, selling any follow-on work, retaining any clients. It has not been an issue at all.
Because those two divisions don't speak to each other. That's what you're saying. They're kept separate.
Well, they're kept separate, but they're not even. Bless you. They're not. They're completely different orders of magnitude of scale. Yeah. That's just completely different order of magnitude scale. So they're just not intersecting in any way.
Sure. I guess it also feeds into a kind of broader narrative around the kind of big four accounting firms anyway. And as more of your business becomes kind of consulting work, there's always been a kind of a wider conversation around should those accounting, consulting, those businesses be separated. So I guess it's similarly as you patch on like all of these different divisions,
Yeah.
any big company, people talk about breaking them up.
Well, I can only speak firsthand. So Accenture has not been in any sort of accounting audit practice, accounting firm business in someone in the industry, someone would have to tell me, but 15 years or something.
Sure.
I mean, well before my tenure there. So that has been long separated. Some of the other firms in the industry, whether that be other very capable firms, I'm not familiar with their actual structures in detail, but the legacy Big 8, Big 6, Big 4 firms, some of them might have at the highest level a structure like that where they participate in financial audits of a company and also have very strong consulting advisory services in and out of marketing and strategy. I mean, those companies are very well run, and they're run by very smart people, and they're, to my knowledge, they're growing. And as long as they put up the appropriate walls and safeguards, I think they're run by people committed to client service, and I do not see any form of problem, but it's really not my area of expertise.
No, sure. I'm just saying it feeds into this wider narrative around consulting companies. But anyway, we'll move on. So I wanted to talk about recruitment as well.
Yeah.
So again, moving into the kind of the more creative side of the business, having not had a legacy in that, does that pose any issues when it comes to recruitment? So say you're, an 18-year-old Don Draper at university thinking about your next thinking about your next move, and it's like, do I go to a well-known Saatchi or whatever? Do I go to a cool like Silicon Valley firm, or do I go to Accenture? Like I imagine that's not embedded in their heads at that point yet. So what do you do to kind of change that when you're building the more creative side of what you do?
Yeah, so I think if we were having this discussion 4 to 5 years ago, I would say, we'd have some dialogue around some of the things that we, Accenture Interactive, need to do differently to more broadly attract creative talent. I mean, today, I guess a couple of observations. One, the Don Draper reference, and I'm sure you don't mean that literally, but if it's a young advertising genius, if you will, one of the many capable men and women in our industry who's dedicated to advertising, perhaps at a very young age, that on its surface would not be a type of candidate we'd be interested in. We are going after people that want to do, cover of the newspaper, transformative work, changing the way a brand interacts with its consumers holistically. Creative in general, creative as an adjective rather than a noun, is highly relevant to us, and we are always on the lookout for creative people, and that would certainly include advertising. So we are right now in a very fortunate position to attract a tremendous amount of top talent from all over the ecosystem, and several different ecosystems actually, and that clearly includes creativity, and that would include advertising and many other types of creativity. But everything from product design to wearable devices to technology to advertising, digital content. So right now it's good because people have seen what we're doing in kind of our efforts to become an experience agency and transforming a lot of the work for our clients for a human good, and that has attracted a lot of top creative talent from many arms. But in terms of a Don Draper-like character, if they want to come in and they want their sole focus to be creating advertising campaigns, I mean, we have people that do that, but the people that do that thrive here are the people that want to do that in the context of reinventing big experiences.
And what do you do from a culture perspective to make that thrive? How do you kind of keep creative people enthused in an organization like yours where it's big and it has layers? Like, what do you do to keep them kind of comfortable?
Well, we certainly have some of the challenges that any big company would have. I mean, that's the reality of having a big company and the blessing and the curse. We don't have really creative or not creative people. You don't walk in with a C on your forehead or a tattoo, and if you don't have a tattoo, you're not creative, or a nose ring. That's not the way it works, for us at least. I mean, people are the broad array of Accenture Interactive, 25,000 people and growing, have creative minds. And it might be creativity deployed to redesigning a process. It might be creativity towards how we apply mobile technology to improve the wearable device aspect of a disabled person. And it also would be creativity in terms of art direction and writing copy and the like. It is all those things. So, viewed holistically, we've had a pretty good run of attracting some of the top talent in the industry.
Sure. What's your view on Madison Avenue as it stands at the moment? It's been, well, firstly, barely anyone's based there anymore, but whatever, we'll still use it as like the analogy. But the holding companies at the moment seem to be having quite a difficult time. They're certainly not growing at, I know you said, a 20% growth kind of thing isn't just Accenture Interactive, but they're certainly not growing at the level they perhaps once were.
Yeah.
And they're challenged from all different aspects, and one of them being that companies like yours are coming and disrupting their business. Where do you see, in kind of 5 years' time, what that landscape's going to look like on the kind of holding company front? Is it going to be smaller? Is there going to be a return to growth, do you think?
It's not. I'm certainly not an equity analyst, and I don't really have any sort of insider opinion on that. I can just tell you as an observer in this space and someone that's interested in it and knows some people in it, I would tell you that I think the companies you're referring to are very well run. I think that they have a series of very strong leaders at the top levels of very strong men and women running those companies. And I think my hypothesis would be that they will continue to be successful for years to come. And I do not anticipate any sort of massive change. That being said, they are going to be challenged to achieve high double-digit growth rate or something like that, as long as their core business is in an industry that isn't growing. So a lot of those companies are moving towards technology-enabled experiences and things like that, but the core business is still closer to things that are really not growing that much. And then you can get into the whole holding company model and what works and what doesn't work, but I think they're generally well run, and I think when I talk to them and they tell me where they're trying to go, I think they have it largely right. Yeah. I think they're trying to get there. I think that there are structural things in place that make it much harder for them than for other firms. But I do not anticipate some sort of
what kind of structural
earth-rattling.
Is it like the different P&Ls of different agencies?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Again, I'm not an expert on this, but they put all these groups together in different forms, and these two are together, then these two, then these three, then these two, and
are you talking about when they bring together agencies for a client? They form teams?
Yeah, or they might form a client agency, or they just, there's a lot of partial uniting, going on there. And, so I think, but that stuff is challenging to do when you have any form of a founder's culture with different earnouts. And I think a lot of the top executives in those spaces are changing that now. And I think that's a win-win for everybody. I really do. Sure. But I think it will take time. And those companies are used to having their own brands. And like, for example, you mentioned that we've bought, I think you had a kind of superlative adjective, I can't remember what it was, on how many companies we've acquired, tons or something like that. But we've bought a number of companies over the last 5 to 7 years. But so of course those companies are in the Accenture Interactive family now, and of course when they were willing to join teams with another group such as us or such as one of the holding companies, because that's not always the case, but it sometimes is. I find out and we talk, and one of the things that attracts them to us is because they want to become part of Accenture Interactive. They want to become part of something bigger, and they understand what that mission is. Now, frequently, equally as good, just different, they want to continue doing what they're doing and be their own brand going forward. And that's a better fit for a holding company model. And that is every bit as good. It's just different from what we offer.
And what do you think about agencies moving into the consulting space? It seems like you can't move for kind of consulting arms of advertising agencies at the moment. Is that a wise move to to your point earlier about they were moving more into the kind of data and technology space,
Yeah.
but then it does seem like they also had these kind of consulting arms too, or has the horse already bolted on that one?
Yeah, I think if you're talking about marketing consulting and brand strategy, things relating to the advertising, media, and marketing businesses, I think that makes sense. I think that they'll be a little bit challenged there because do the best, marketing strategy, brand strategy, consulting minds go there versus, traditional strong players in that business? Maybe, and I think if they can get a couple of key hires that will then, just like anything else, any business, when you create key leadership, bring in a key leader who's charismatic and kind of build a team around him or her, then that, has a snowball effect, which is very positive. And I think that they will succeed in that soon or eventually in the broader media marketing advertising strategy space. If what you're getting at is business strategy, where they want to branch into, competitive analysis and new product design and new entrants and make recommendations of what geographies this business should be in, and that, I don't see that. I think that's too far away from their core competency.
Sure. And now, so you speak to CMOs often, and you speak to CMOs about their kind of biggest problems, their biggest dreams. What's kind of on the mind of the CMO at the moment? I mean,
Yeah.
That's pretty broad. They all think different things, but
Yeah. Well, that's very closely tied to and hopefully aligned with what we're trying to do, because when we talk to the CMOs that are looking forward, it's largely around how can they reinvent their experience. It is not around how they get more impressions, or not how they get just slightly more ticks on share of voice, or how they or the color of the packaging, or it's really not there. It's really more of how do I shift my business to 80% digital channel? How do I shift my customer service function to be 80% automated? How can I drastically change that? And specifically, how can you in our case, meaning us, help me with partnering with my CEO and morphing my job into one of business growth rather than just advertising or marketing growth? Those are the types of things that the discussions we have all the time. It's rare that we're in a discussion with a CMO or a SVP of advertising where it's about a specific campaign.
Sure.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of minutes left, and we've got some questions that have popped up from the app. So we'll try and whittle through them quickly if we can. You can see them too, right? So,
I can.
So from Anonymous, what are the criteria for you when it comes to acquiring companies or agencies for growth?
Yeah. So several things. Very clearly, it has to be a new capability that we see being critical to creating new holistic experiences for clients, or taking something that is already critical that will help us scale in a different geography. If it's not one of those things, if it's something on the margin, we do not acquire a company to buy revenue or just to grow by revenue. Period. Full stop. No exceptions. Other than that, it is absolutely about cultural fit and finding the leaders and DNA of that organization that can both be themselves. We want to buy them and have them be themselves, but they have to buy into the things I've talked about here, going after changing experiences for human good and being holistic. If they're just about one aspect or one empowering little capability, it's unlikely that would be a fit for us. So they have to buy into the strategy.
Okay. Right. Anonymous has popped up again. Seems to be kind of on the defensive, I think. Are you looking to collaborate with media agencies, or to take their top performing strategists? Well,
we collaborate. We collaborate all the time. But so again, what's a media agency? So if you're referring to a programmatic agency, if you're a platform company, that's something that we would be should be partnering with you in our ecosystem. We'll always, if you have a compelling platform and can help our clients achieve their goals, then Accenture Interactive Programmatic Services should be working with you. If you're referring to more traditional integration of offline and online, or traditional media planning and buying, and the upfronts and pre-buying inventory and the things that have been happening the last X years, that's not really something we do. So we collaborate and we partner with that to the extent clients are still doing that. But in terms of taking their top performing strategists, if you're in the former bucket I described, yes, we'd be interested in all those people. If you're in the latter bucket, we don't really do that. We're not really in that business, so we're not interested.
Sure. And one last one, because we have a few seconds left. I was actually going to ask about this because I realised we haven't really spoken about the platforms whatsoever. So I'm going to riff on their question a little bit from Martech Ape. So they've asked if agencies, brands, platforms, consulting firms are you frenemies. But I want to ask just specifically about the platform businesses, so the tech companies, basically. So a very famous advertising person often referred to kind of Google as a frenemy and Facebook as a frenemy. Where do you kind of sit there? Are you more friendly than enemy?
We are way more on the fre and not at all on the emmy. Or nemi, I should say, maybe, to parse the word appropriately. I don't really see, whether it be Google, Amazon, Facebook, Baidu, Tencent,
Right.
these companies, we have
But
growing
they can
practices.
I can't even say that word, but they could disrupt you as well, right? They can come in, and Amazon can come in and completely disrupt a company's retail model.
Best I can say, Amazon can do anything. So, that could largely be true, and that does not keep us awake at night, though. We have, I think, just as many reasons to believe their growth will continue to need a partner strategy with people that have the kind of access we have and the type of scaled projects that we have. So, but it's not just them. There's other platform companies in the commerce and content spaces, and we invest very heavily in things like Hybris and things like Adobe and many of the other platforms, because those are also if most experiences involve you buying something or ordering something, and so we have to have typically partner of the year or similar level status with those companies in order to drive that for our clients. I do not see us being enemies to really any of those platform companies.
Sure. More fresh than enemies.
I would go on. I would say full stop friends. I don't really have any. They all want more. That's if you ask them, well, what can you do to help you? We want more.
Yeah.
Well, how we want more. That's more and more pipeline, more, and so does every single joint pipeline meeting go exactly the way we would like? No, but it's all about doing more together all the time.
Sure. Well,
never about doing less.
Unfortunately, we have no more time, so no more from Brian, but if we can give him a big round of applause. Thanks so much, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you.